gold trails and ghost towns. Share the adventures of our early pioneers as we explore the development of the Pacific Northwest and beyond. With your host, Mike Roberts, and historian Bill Barlee.
Well, welcome to Gold Trails and Ghost Towns. Mike Roberts, Bill Barlee here to do a story. Now, I don't know how we've told stories for so long and have never told this story, because this was the famous story of my boyhood on Vancouver Island. And now, load it up. Where are we heading today?
Well, actually, Mike, we're going to tell two stories. One is the place you know of, and that's Leech River. And these are kind of interesting stories because I have personal experiences in both of them. And the other one is the famous Zeballos. And that area is farther up the island in Esperanza Inland. And the interesting thing is, one was discovered in the 1860s, actually 1864, and this was the Leech River gold discovery. And that was a placer gold find, okay? And the other one was Zeballos, and it was discovered in the 1920s. And that's farther up and kind of, at that time, kind of an unknown part of Vancouver Island on the west side. Yeah. So we're going to be discussing both of these, one in one half and the other in the other half.
Okay. And you maintain they were both flukes.
Yeah, I think so. Certainly Leech River to a degree, and Zeballos most definitely.
All right. Two flukes. There's gold out there for you fluky prospectors. We'll tell those stories right after this break. Don't go away. Welcome back to Gold Trails and Ghost Towns. Mike Roberts and Bill Barlee traveling to Vancouver Island today for a couple of stories about gold, and you call them flukes. First of all, I mean, what makes a fluke?
Well, it's an accidental discovery, really, although it was intended to be a discovery expedition. So the government of the day decided to launch an expedition under the command of a Lieutenant Leech. And they sent along an artist, a very well-known artist, a superb artist, Frederick Whymper. He was going to be the artist and the illustrator. And they said, go out and see if you can find, this is 1864, any other mineral occurrences on Vancouver Island, whether they be placer or lode.
Yeah, and if this was because the Fraser River rush was over, it was deteriorating in the caribou.
Yeah, they're declining significantly in the caribou by 1864. It was still high, but they thought there was gold all over British Columbia. So this was the expedition to find it, the Vancouver Island Exploration Expedition. And they set out, and not knowing where to go, but they wandered in kind of a northwesterly direction, got about 10 miles from Victoria, went up the Sauk River, and didn't find much on the Sauk, maybe a little bit of indication, but not much. It is not a placer gold river. And then on kind of an off chance, they decided to turn up an unnamed tributary, which later became known as the Leech. And as they go up this tributary, Mike, they start picking up rather coarse placer gold, actually. And of course, everyone is amazed because, first of all, the government is paying 2/3 of the cost, and the volunteers with them are paying 1/3. So this isn't bad. This is
somebody's going to get paid back. Okay.
Yeah. So they start panning, and they're starting to find half-ounce, quarter-ounce slugs, 1/3 ounce, 2 or 3 grains, and so on. Really quite coarse gold, well worn, but on both sides of the Leech. And then they begin staking their claims all the way up the Leech. And before long, and the word is doesn't stay secret for very long when a gold discovery is made, especially when it's free gold like that. So soon there were hundreds of people on the Leech River.
And these people, were disenchanted with the caribou, wanted to be first on the scene.
Close to Victoria. Close to Victoria, and there was a photographer there, Mike, and that's what I like about this. There's a photographer there in 1864. That's why some of these photographs are not perfect, but they're pretty good.
This is a great photograph. Now, this is like every river I know on Vancouver Island, big boulders, well-worn, been there a long time, and this is where?
That one, I guess that's Braes Bar, I think. Yeah, I'm looking at it upside down. And Braes Bar was typical of the difficulties they had in the Leech River. There's a long tom on that one, and the miners, some of them are waving at the photographer. They have to freeze, by the way, in the Leech. You can just see it on the right-hand side of that photograph. But very, very tough ground to mine.
Well, how do you mine ground like that? These huge boulders weigh a ton apiece.
Yeah, well, at least the average individual, the novice, will mine the upper end of the boulder as the current is coming down. You actually mine the lower end of the boulder. That's where the boulder occurs. It comes in on that kind of that back eddy or that back.
That's one little tip that you've given us today. So that's Braes Bar.
Yeah.
Found some good stuff on Braes Bar?
Yeah, they did. They found probably around 1,000 ounces on Braes Bar, which is pretty good for a hand miner. This is poor man's gold.
This is the Gold Commissioner's Camp And look at, they got the tent set up. And again, this was a perfect promoter's dream. Because
of course.
Photographer there, close to Victoria, all of the news gets out quick.
Of course it did. And of course the government was there very quickly with the gold commissioner. And tents are set up here, and indicates, and look at that, and the trees, of course, are uncut in that particular era. And typical of a gold commissioner's camp in the 1860s.
Look at this batch of prospectors around this log cabin here. I mean, they look like that lonesome bunch, don't they? I mean, there's the beards and the arms crossed, and that's one of the first cabins on site.
Yeah, I think it is. I think that may be the Mountain Rose, and I'm looking at it upside down, but it looks like it to me. And the chimney itself is actually made of wood as well. And these are typical of the miners of the day. They're Californians, Mike. There's not much doubt about it at all.
They're probably soaking wet and sick of it.
Yeah, you can tell by their hats. You know, they have that Stetson type hat, or the flat-brimmed hat.
This is the bullion claim.
Yeah, the bullion claim is quite good. And this is probably, the biggest nugget they found in this area was 4 ounces, Mike.
Now this little baby I've got in my hand here is
not quite an ounce.
So 4 times larger than that.
Yeah, to be 4 times larger than that, it would be an eye opener.
Listen, this is an eye opener to me. If this one clanked in my pan, I would say I'm staying.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I panned that out of one of my claims, and we panned out bigger ones, but actually any nugget over 2 or 3 penny weight is a clinker in the pan, and then there's a clunker in the pan.
That's a clunker, and that 4 ouncer obviously was Eureka. They heard that all the way to Victoria. Sure. And that was in the bullion. That was in
the bullion claim, and the interesting thing in the bullion claim, you can see two rockers here, which is not the best way to pan in that particular, but some of these guys were fair novices too, you know. They weren't experienced miners, so they did miss some gold, and I'll tell you more about that later.
All right. This is a grocery store of the day. This is Mr. Ward's grocery store?
Yeah, W. Ward and Company. And selling virtually everything. You see some liquor bottles off on the left, there'd be beer bottles. And they would be from Victoria, by the way. And over here, I don't know what this guy has in his hand. You have weighing scales there and some goods. And several of them smoking pipes, which was typical of the miner in the day, and some flowers sitting there. And pretty rude, pretty crude, but would do for the time.
Making money.
He was there first.
He was there first and making money. Here's these guys are again, and look at, there's a man swinging a pick in this. This is an action shot, for heaven's sakes.
Yeah, they're posing in 1864.
You mean that guy's holding that pick over his head just while the guy's saying, hold that shot, hold it?
That's right, he is indeed. And the guy's doing the same thing with the shovel. So these 5 Trojans are there looking for gold, and they'll probably get some in that spot, but they'll have to get under the boulders first and get down to bedrock where most of the gold is.
I can almost hear them, good-natured. Have you that shot taken yet? Have you got any film in that thing? I mean, they were rocking.
Well, what they think is they think they're in another caribou.
Yeah.
And remember, it didn't have film; it had a glass plate negative.
I know. I was kind of trying to think of what the duplicate of that might have been. Now, this shot here, after a hard day's work, you retreated to the local bar.
That's Lazelle's retreat, and that's what he calls it. And rather interesting. There's a woman in the photograph, and I wonder why she is there, because it's unusual. She's quite dressed up, and right next to the first tent on the right-hand side is a grinding wheel or grindstone, and it says 2 bits per grind. So if you had an axe that needed sharpening, you had a pick that needed sharpening, or even a shovel occasionally needed sharpening, you went to Lazelle's retreat. But his main selling point was wines, liquors, and cigars. No doubt about it.
I mean, this is so new that they hadn't even put up the clapboard houses yet. This was first come, first served.
You bet.
That's amazing.
You bet.
Look at this great big pool here. Now, this reminds me, too, of a lot of Vancouver Island places.
Yeah, it does. It's a beautiful river, actually, Mike, and this is a pool they thought, and these guys go out in a raft in 1864, and they're looking for gold in the bottom of the pool. Well, first of all, gold does not usually occur in the bottom of the pool except where the stream or river comes in at the top would carry the gold, and then it deposits immediately. It doesn't carry along the bottom of the pool. So this is kind of a forlorn exercise for these 2 greenhorns.
Now, what would they try and do? Drain the pool and then mine what they could get down to?
Yeah, but you wouldn't even do that. It wouldn't be worthwhile. Only place you would mine is where the entrance of the stream comes right into the pool. That's the only place. And you see a lot of sand there and fine gravels. That's not a good place to look for gold.
All right. That's the deep pool. Here we've got, now you mentioned that there was a guy named Whymper along on this trip, and this is a sketch of I
the
guess
Burke's Hotel, yeah. And it looks like a Whymper, but I'm not sure. And I haven't got the details on this. I have a Whymper painting, but and he was very, very good, and he was very accurate what he painted. And so this is the first substantial hotel in the Leech River district.
Not a big operation, as you can see. And this is the old sorry?
There's a couple of other things here. First of all, you know, they have a place to tie your horse up, of course, a hitching rope. And then you have the grinding stone over here, which is always necessary for a hotel. So that gathered people to the hotel. Would probably be 2 bits of drink, shake roof hotel, but it was a mistake. And it was a mistake because the Leech River rush really didn't last very long, Mike. The total amount of gold they took out of the Leech River was somewhere around 6,000 to 7,000 ounces. Now that sounds like a lot, and that is a fair amount, but that's about all.
Yeah. Now, you went there yourself on Vancouver Island.
Yeah.
Now, I remember the Leech River because I only know it because the bottle hunters and pot hunters went there. That was a popular thing to do.
Yeah.
You took a class there.
Yeah. About 15 years ago, Mike, I was teaching placer mine in Victoria, and I said, well, where we go? Well, I said, I've never looked at the Leech. I'd been on about 200 streams in British Columbia, streams and rivers, looking for placer gold, and enjoyed the company of the streams, and thought, okay, we'll go up the Leech. And so I took about 100 people along, if I remember correctly. And first of all, I looked at the map of the Leech, and there was a fork as you go well up the Leech, and I thought, that looks kind of interesting to me. And it wasn't a topographical map, it was a geological map, so I couldn't tell the heights and so on. But I said, that looks like the right formation. And so I went to see the owner of that lease, a guy named Waters in downtown Victoria, who had a machine shop, if I remember correctly. And I asked him, I said, Mr. Waters, I said, could I take a placer mining class up there? He says, yeah, Bill, I don't think there's very much there. I said, well, there may not be. I said, but if you don't mind, I said, they can keep what they, oh, sure, he said, they can keep what they get. He was a very generous guy, very nice man. And so anyway, I took this class up there. This was fairly early morning. We got up there about 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock in the morning. And so we went up the Leech, and we kept on going. I didn't stop anywhere. I wanted to go to the spot where I'd looked at. And we crossed over that one little tributary, and then came down and crossed the other little tributary, so we didn't have to cross the main Leech. And I said, okay, this looks like some bedrock in here, some surface bedrock and some rim rock. And I said, go right down to the bottom of the bedrock. And I said, it isn't very far to dig here, 3 or 4 inches in some places, a foot in another place. And I was rather surprised, to be quite candid. We started picking up small nuggets like that immediately. And I've never seen people so industrious. I mean, I don't know if they made wages or not, but I left at it was early fall, and I left at about 6:30 at night, I think it was, maybe 7 o'clock, Mike, and I was amazed because I looked across the river, and some of them were still panning using flashlights. Now that's determination.
That's gold. Yeah. That's gold. Did you tell Mr. Waters he might have more on his claim than he realized?
Yeah, I did. I showed him where an old run was. I hadn't tested the run. There was an old oxidized run in there, Mike, but I hadn't tested it.
All righty. That's the Leech River. Not a long operation, but obviously you can return to these sometimes and get a surprise. Coming back in just a moment to take you to the north end of the island for another fluky find of gold. Don't go away. Welcome back to Gold Trails and Ghost Towns. Mike Roberts, Bill Barlee on Vancouver Island. Our second big fluke occurs in Zeballos, you say?
Yeah, purely accidental on Esperanza Inlet, and I got the story in a strange way, Mike. I'm teaching in Port Alice in 1956. And I go down to the bank, and the bank manager says to me, he says, Bill, he says, I hear you're interested in history. I said, that's true. He said, well, there's an old man dying in the Port Alice hospital. I think you should go and see him. I said, what's his name? He says, his name is Ilstad, and he's an old fisherman. So I said, okay, I will. I was 22 years old. So I walked down there, and I go in and go up to the hospital, and indeed he's in bad shape, but he's very coherent. And I said, Mr. Ilstad, I understand that you have a mining story to tell me. He said, Zeballos. So he proceeds to tell me about Zeballos. And he said, we were fishing, and he came from the northern part of Vancouver Island, a lot of Scandinavians up there. And they were beating their way down the west side of Vancouver Island and caught one of those westerly storms, and they can be horrific off there. And they had to seek harbor, and they had to seek it quickly. So they went into Esperanza Inlet and went down the inlet a little ways, and then got into a little bay. And this is the little bay right here. This is where the gold discoveries were made, very close to this, Mike.
Okay.
And they had to hunker down and then wait out the storm. And they waited for several days, and they were getting tired of sitting on the boat, so they decided to take to shore. And they went up the nearest river, which was the Zeballos River. Now, there had been a little placer gold discovered in the Zeballos in 1908. But they weren't looking for placer gold. They had no pans with them, you know, for placer gold pans anyway. And they found some free gold in kind of a greenstone, and a lot of it, 3 and 4 inch veins, and it was obviously free gold, even to the uninitiated eye. So they began staking, and they staked very, very, very heavily all through that area, kind of like greenhorns would stake, but it stood up in the court of law. And then they began to sell them. And Ilstad said, you know, he said, we were really living high off the hog. He said, we had gold-plated fixtures, doorknobs and bathroom fixtures and everything. He said, they were gold-plated. And he said, of course, as the years wore on and we came into some tough times, he said, we had to take those gold-plated fixtures down to Victoria, he said, and give them to the pawn shop for what they'd give us. And he said, but one thing I remember very, very closely, he said, was kind of interesting. He said, we put a couple of charges in there with dynamite, I guess eventually after they staked the claims. And he said, as it blew up, he said, and this is quartz and greenstone, he said, we could see the gold actually coming down. Well, that was definitely an exaggeration. And that's what his mind had done I guess, over the year, relived that experience. But it was spectacular. And in the 1920s, a lot of people came in. And here's an example of how good this claim was. It says, this is by an individual called Malmberg and Nordstrom, also two Scandinavians, yep. Very interesting. They're 2 miles upriver. And then it says this, at the time of my examination, Malmberg was working on a small stringer, that's a small quartz vein, up to 3 or 4 inches wide, that's about all. It was carrying galena, zinc blende, pyrrhotite, and chalcopyrite, and it assayed up to 40 ounces to the ton. He had 6 sacks there. He thought there'd be 20 ounces to the ton in those sacks, which was very, very good indeed.
How many now? Now we start getting into these,
Yeah.
I guess, the location.
Yeah.
And so we've got, first of all, this little photograph here is a privateer. That's
Yeah.
one. That was going to be one of the big mines.
Yeah, and it's upriver farther even yet. Now there were a whole bunch of mines in there, Mike.
Yep.
There was the Answer, and there was the Golden Peak, and there was the Golden Gate, and there was the Van Isle, and a whole bunch of different mines in there, Mike. There were so many groups of mines. There were literally dozens and dozens and dozens. And what attracted them there was the free gold in the quartz, which you could see with the naked eye. This is the entrance to the privateer. This is about 37 or 38. 3 of the miners there, and they look pretty happy, so they've hit some pretty good ore.
Equipment starts rolling in. Of course, this would all have to be served by boat. This is the only way into this country.
Only way it comes in is by water, and there's some old equipment, and that's about 1938, and look at the territory. Those roads are in very rough shape. You know, it's a rain area.
Well, here's Main Street, I guess, and that's what Main Street is. It had to be boards. You couldn't drive on the ground, so you...
That's right. And all the stores were on pilings, you know, and it's really quite amazing. That's about 1938, so that's Main Street, and they called the town Zeballos after the river.
Now, I love the fact that they didn't call this street any of the traditional avenues. It wasn't called West Avenue or Hamilton Avenue or Governor General's Avenue.
It was called May West Avenue.
May West Avenue.
It was the 1930s, and the miners at this particular time were much more interested in May West than they were in the various political dignitaries anywhere across the country.
Well, they hadn't served them too well because they'd just come through the recession, the Depression, and so they weren't going to respect anybody except May West. And look at that. That is rough country.
Yeah, it is.
Definitely.
And they start hitting, Mike. They really start hitting. And here's one of the pictures, one of the photographs of the privateer camp, pretty substantial. Had about 130 men up there, if I remember correctly, and they are on full operation right now. And here's what they get, and they get some absolute dandy stuff.
Now, this is an amazing photograph. Tell us what we're looking, and these guys are all looking pretty happy.
Oh, they're looking very happy.
Shareholders are happy when things come to pass.
They just can't help smiling. And these are the first gold bricks poured out of the privateer, 1938. There's probably at least half a ton of pure gold in this, and that half a ton really makes the privateer mine. There were other mines that produced, but the privateer was definitely the best.
Now, those you can see those gold, what do you call them, ingots?
Ingots, yeah.
Right there?
Sure.
Now, they would be about what size?
Oh, those would be about 10 inches by about 4 inches by about 3 inches deep.
Yeah.
So they're probably 150 pounds each, somewhere around that. And there are 11 of them there, Mike. There are 11 bars there. So over half a ton, edging onto a ton of gold.
A couple of artifacts to show you. By comparison, this is just a little muffin tin for gold.
Sure.
But this is where you would ladle your molten gold into here, and this is where it would set.
Yeah, that's right. But this would be an assay would use this, kind of for a crude assay. You could use it. You could get a button of gold out of that. And the buttons are produced like that, and I should have brought a couple along with me, which I didn't.
Now the button, this would not be filled with gold. It would just be a little button down in the bottom.
Button gold, button of silver, whatever mineral you're after.
Now, is this the kind of ladle you would ladle the molten gold
Yeah, could be
into?
ladled into that. That's right.
And look at that. So that would be the ladle you'd use. But before you'd go to that,
oh, of course,
it would all be mortared.
Sure.
So you'd take a piece of ore and you'd crush it up in here.
Yeah. And the ore came in two different types. It came in that zinky type ore, which was this type of ore, Mike. You know. But if there's chalcopyrite in that and pyrite and so on, that would have gold, and the gold values would be quite high. They wouldn't be too concerned about the silver.
No.
They were definitely concerned about the gold. And there were lots of stringers there, Mike, that averaged 6, 8, 10 ounces to the ton, and that's amazing.
So
that was
now
really
when
quite
I think back to
spectacular.
that photograph again, a half a ton of gold in 1938.
Over half a ton, I think, yeah.
Worth, what was it? What we
Well, at
$18 an ounce?
$35 an ounce it had increased, okay?
So that is a find and a half.
Oh, yeah. All the shareholders did extremely well, which they don't always do in mining operations.
And here we have our last shot of Zeballos, Main Street. And this is a much more sedate look than the May West Avenue that we saw a minute ago.
It's pretty well settled now, and you can see a couple of cars on Main Street, 3 or 4 cars on Main Street, Mike. People are well dressed. There are children there, and probably women in the camp. And Zeballos, by that time, is well established.
Now, we haven't talked about Gold River, which is in that same general area.
Yeah.
I mean, was that associated with this claim, or is that an all another story?
Well, not usually. Anytime you come across a creek called Gold Creek or Gold River, usually there isn't much gold in it, which is surprising. There may be just enough to get your interest, but seldom. I can't think of any Gold River, any Gold Creek that was rich in British Columbia, and a lot of them have been named that, Mike.
Very interesting. So if you're planning on investing in something, don't always go to where it's called Gold River. Isn't that the wonderful whimsy of this? You're teaching as a 22-year-old with his ears open and an appreciation for history, and Mr. Ilstad tells you the story, including the gold flakes raining down after the explosion.
Yeah, he was quite a guy. And I got him just in time, Mike, because he passed on within the week. And it was quite an experience. I can visualize it right now.
All right.
Very interesting, man.
Thank you very much for today. A couple of fluky finds, according to Bill. The Leech River find on southern Vancouver Island, just 10 miles away from Victoria, and Zeballos, much later claim, found in the 20s, developed in the 30s, and great stories on gold trails and ghost towns. See you next time on Gold Trails.